What's up, guys, and welcome back to Beyond the Void Horror Podcast. My name is Alex, and today we're going to be doing our top 10 horror films of 2023 right now. So first up, I just want to say welcome back. Happy New Year. Hope you had a wonderful holiday season. I'm so glad to be back. There are so many things that are planned for this website and for the YouTube and for the podcast. We have a lot of content coming your way here soon for the brand new year. This is going to be the year, guys. Like I'm telling you right now, and I need your help. So like, subscribe, share this with a friend. We're going to blow this mother father up this year, okay? Anyway, I'm so glad to have you back. I'm going to do my top 10 horror movies, but I want you to know that I did a podcast where we do our top 20. And so there will be 10 more movies that you might want to check out. And when you get down to the top 20, they're all pretty close together. And there's going to be some movies that you may like that I didn't like as much, or I liked less and you like a lot. So definitely check out the podcast. I'll put a link down below. I even give honorable mentions in there. So if you want some extra movies that you might not have heard, I would highly recommend you check that out after this video. But without further ado, let's get into our top 10 horror movies of this past year. First up, and number 10 on the list, is Suitable Flesh, which is a movie that was directed by Joe Lynch, the guy who did Wrong Turn 2, Mayhem, and Knights of Badassdom. He does a sort of Stuart Gordon style 90s horror, H.P. Lovecraft style that I thought was really fun, kind of sexy, kind of awesome, and super gory at parts. Really reminded me of the thrilling movies that I got in the 90s from Stuart Gordon, but a modern take on it. So Joe Lynch kind of mirrors that, but does his own thing here. It's a story about a woman who sort of falls in lust with a patient of hers who is swapping bodies and seems on the outside to her to be multiple personality disorder of sorts. Gets herself ensnarled in some dark, ritualistic, crazy body swapping, super crazy stuff. Things get pretty wild. This has Barbara Crampton in it, and she does a really good job in this movie, as well as producing the film. Heather Graham is the lead actress in this film, which we haven't really seen her in a lot of stuff for a while, and boy, does she get pretty wild in this movie. I really like the performances. I like the gore. I like the mystery. It's not your regular H.P. Lovecraft film, so it's not going to have a ton of tentacles and stuff. It may not be for everybody, but it definitely was for me. Number 9, Megalomaniac, which, whoo, this is probably one of the more dire, dark, gothic as fuck horror movies I saw all year. This is not a very story-centric movie, but the basic gist of the story is a movie that takes place in Belgium. It's by a director, Karim Alouhaj, who I've never heard of, and did a really good job, I think, here, painting and aesthetically painting what it's like to be over the shoulder of a serial killer. Essentially, it's about the offspring, two kids, a boy and a girl, who are the offspring of a notorious Belgian real-life serial killer that disappeared and they don't know what happened to him. He would cut up women in the middle of the night. He would find them, kill them, cut them up, put them in bags, and spread them out like Johnny Appleseed throughout Belgium. Pretty wild. Someone decided, hey, what would it be like if that guy had kids? What would they be like? Would they pick up the same traits from their parent, whether it be mental or just what they've learned from him, that one of which is sort of the wild one and the other one you feel kind of bad for. But it gets dark, very sexualized, in some very trigger-worthy stuff. It's so well shot. Like I said, it is one of the more goth movies I saw all year. Again, not a big story, kind of graphic. You want to look away in a lot of moments, but it made my emotions go through the ringer. I say check it out. Number 8, Venus, a movie that nobody's talking about except for one of my buddies, Kruger, on his podcast called Flesh Wound Features. And I saw the trailer for this, and I saw that it was by director of Record or Wreck. Yeah. Wame Balawera did this film about a girl who works at a sort of dance club that is run by the mafia, and they do drug dealings and stuff. She robs them blind one night, gets injured, and hides out at her sister's house, who has a young daughter, and the apartment complex that they're in is pretty dilapidated and has its own heinous things going on inside, including witchery. One night, when the sister disappears, the girl who stole all the drugs has to take care of her niece, and they sort of develop a friendship as they figure out what happened to her mom. It's one part super crime thriller, reminded me of the movie Titane, if you know, in the very beginning of the movie, and then goes into Suspiria. Hell is unleashed on this apartment complex at some point, and the graphic gore and practical effects are pretty amazing. It's a really cool story that I think you should check out.
Number 7.
Up next, 7, we got Do Not Disturb, which is a movie that I had never really heard of, and I just kind of went on a whim to watch. I ended up interviewing the director, John Ainsley, who wrote a story about a couple who were going on a vacation together to sort of rekindle their terrible relationship. It's really a weird mix of a film, and it is a little disarming, is what I would call it. This movie is also kind of a gut punch and a head punch because of that disarming thing. It starts off like a comedy between two people who are having a really terrible relationship, and it's pretty clear they shouldn't be together, but they're kind of stuck in relationship purgatory. They end up taking some substances and psychedelically start eating each other. Yeah, there's a lot of that. But it's really a crazy, fun, dark. It definitely is serious, but there is like elements of like comedy in there that are thrown in as you kind of see these people devolve into madness. And it is a really underrated film that I saw this year, and it just got stuck in my head. I love the ending to this film. I like the messaging behind it, and it really is a great film to show that if you have a pretty decent idea, you can make an indie film that does just as good as a lot of these mainstream movies, if not better. Some of the characters you're not supposed to like. You're not supposed to like these two together. And that's kind of going to throw some people all over the place, I think. But for me, I thought it was pretty great. I hadn't seen a film like this. Pretty graphic and fun. So I would highly recommend checking it out. It's not the 2023 Netflix movie called Do Not Disturb. It is called Do Not Disturb, and it's from 2022. But just look for this cover and you should be fine.
Number 6.
Up next for 6, we have No One Will Save You. And this movie was a really big surprise for a lot of people who watched it on Hulu. It just kind of dropped out and everybody was like, what? This is a movie by Brian Duffield too. If you saw his movie Spontaneous or The Babysitter on Netflix, this is one of his movies. It's part home invasion, part sci-fi sort of alien thing going on, and a lot more. And it goes places that are a little metaphorical. There's some things that are kind of complex going on in the movie that did confuse people by the end, because the end is where a lot of people really kind of tapped out on this movie. But I really kind of liked it. I thought it was really unique and different, and I was not expecting it where it went. The acting and the performances by this main girl are just phenomenal. The camera work, the CGI was really good. Everything was really popping off. And this movie is a lot bigger than it seemed, but it's done in a condensed kind of indie way. Definitely worth a watch if you got Hulu. I would check it out. I really enjoyed it.
Number 5.
Up next, we got number 5, Talk to Me. That's right, the Rocka Boys that we grew up watching on YouTube doing crazy stunts, throwing each other through walls and acting like a really deranged Ronald McDonald, have made a movie, and it is nothing like the content that they put on their channel. In fact, this was a very competent film that was picked up at the festivals and had a bidding war over it, eventually won by A24. I know some of you guys out there get really upset when you hear A24 because you think it's pretentious. Well, this movie is definitely not part of that kind of type of movie. There is definitely some artistic stuff that is going on in this film that I think is definitely competing with some of its other catalog, but it is a different film in a lot of ways, because this is kind of like your curse film where a bunch of kids find a mummified hand and start basically talking to the dead with it. They grab the hand, they say, "Talk to me." A ghost appears that looks gnarly as hell, by the way, and then they start inviting him into their body. These kids, being that they're young, seem to treat it like a fun little thing, like you would if you were going out drinking with your buddies, except they're just having fun with this ghost talking hand, and things get pretty out of control. The main character, the main star of the film, is this girl who is now moved on to working in a lot of different other bigger films. She immediately got picked up because of her performance in this film. There is some elements of loss and addiction, and they do some different lore in the movie to make the curse film not feel like something like these other films that we've seen. It feels a little bit more fresh and new. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was one of the first films that I thought, hey, this is one of the good films this year. So check it out. Number 4 with Cobweb, which is by a director that I haven't really heard before. He did some work on like a music video for the metal band Gojira and a TV series called Marianne, which I didn't see. It is by Samuel Bowden, who did a story about a kid who's experiencing some supernatural stuff in his house with some very awkward and strange parents, which are played by Lizzie Kaplan and Anthony Starr from the Boys TV show. And they do some really great work here being the parents, because they are unsettling as hell, and you're not sure if they're going to kill the kid or kill people around them, if they're serial killers or whatever else is going on in the house. It just seems like a lot's going on, and this mystery sort of unravels as you watch the film. It's done in the style of like a dream or like a fable, where the kid is experiencing this really odd thing going on. Some people call it like an Antlers movie, and I can see the comparisons for sure. But where this movie goes and what it does in the movie gets pretty graphic, pretty bizarre, and totally not realistic. I kind of loved it for that. I loved how far it went and kind of breaking the trope that this movie kind of leads you down the path to think it is. It's not going to be the deepest movie this year, but man, was it really solid for me. Some people thought it was boring or too slow or didn't seem realistic enough, but it's definitely a fictional film, so I don't know. Maybe it's just something that they didn't like in it. I really did. I say check it out. It's out on VOD.
Number 3.
Up next, number 3. We're getting down there, guys. Last 3. Evil Dead Rise. Now, this is one of the first films that I was really excited to see in the theater. Super excited, because I love Evil Dead, the franchise, and I've enjoyed all of them. As it stands, I'm a fan of the second one the most. I think it's the first one after that, then the remake, then Army of Darkness, and this one, I think, kind of belongs somewhere in the middle. I don't know where yet. It's a different movie with different characters, and that's what I kind of liked about it. This takes place not in a cabin, but it takes place out in the middle of Los Angeles in a dilapidated apartment complex, which some people compared to the movie by Lamberto Bava, Demons Part 2, but it definitely felt a little bit different. Now, there were some things in the movie that I wish they would have done more, but this is a really solid film, and every time I've watched it, which I've seen it about 4 times, I think now, I have found something new that I missed and didn't see, and I feel like we don't get movies like this that just go for it very often. It does have some nostalgic throwbacks to some of the other Evil Dead movies, but it doesn't do it in a kind of like disrespectful way. It does it in a way that it kind of embraces the fandom of Evil Dead, and it kind of says, hey, I know you're a fan, and here's some newer ways that we did things. I really liked the performances in this. I thought the kids were a nice touch in this movie. It's like a mother and some kids get invaded by Evil Dead. That's pretty much all you need to know if you don't know. And it takes over the building, and it's extremely bloody. The opening alone was amazing. The way that they get the evil into the building is different. And they use some speakers, and it was haunting. And I know a lot of people they have a different thing that they like about every single movie in the Evil Dead franchise, and it just didn't hit with them. But it did with me, and I will watch anything with Evil Dead in it at this point. They plan on doing movies every year in a different setting. I don't know if they're all going to connect in the end, and then everybody meets up to fight the evil, but that would be pretty cool in my book. 4 times I've seen it already. and I've enjoyed it every single time.
Number 2.
Number 2, Thanksgiving. Eli Roth's faux trailer that he did for the Grindhouse movie that came out in like 2007 or something. It is much different than I expected to be. And I think that kind of hits a little different with some people, but for me, it worked. And it's surprising because this movie kind of lends itself to do a sort of Scream thing while also paying homage to a lot of the 70s and 80s slasher films that started the craze. And it kind of does its own unique thing while paying homage to these other elements that we've seen as we've gone on into the slasher verse. To be honest with you, slashers have kind of taken a large dip for a very long time. It wasn't obviously until like Scream came out that it sort of resurfaced in a different version. This is kind of like, you know, paying homage to Scream, but also all those other films by giving us some pretty amazing graphic gore in a silly, fun way. And the characters, you know, some people I don't know. Some people didn't like him. I'm typically not a big Scream fan. You know, I only like 2 of the movies out of the entire franchise and think that they're solid fun. I really enjoyed this. I thought it was a really good blend of things with some really great kills, some really funny vibes and things that were said in it. It's much better to me than Scream in a lot of ways, but you know, it's not going to be like killer centric. So if you're looking for like a Terrifier movie where it like focuses only on the character, which, you know, to me, Terrifier feels like a movie that is like 5 films deep in a franchise where you've already gotten to know the character and he's sort of the main spotlight now. This is much different. Like they are doing a sort of typical slasher thing, and we haven't really gotten to know this character too much, but it all gets kicked off when a Black Friday sale goes wrong and everybody starts dying. It gets really uncomfortable, really graphic, and I just thought it was fun.
And now for number 1.
Last but not least, we have our number 1. And some of you probably already know what this is. And that is When Evil Lurks. Demian Rugna, who is one of my favorite new directors out on the horror scene, who is from Argentina, who directed a movie called Terrified back in 2017, 2018, that I absolutely adore. I was more than glad to go see this in the theater because I loved his first film, which isn't even his first film. He has a whole swath of films that are Argentinian and have not been released here, and I really want to check them out. But this is one of the more disturbing films that I saw all year long. It's done in a very deep kind of storytelling that is involving possession, where a town is infected with some sort of possession. An exorcist goes to fix it, and something happens where nothing keeps the evil from spreading. There is a metaphor in this movie, and it's not a deep one, but they do cut it pretty deep with some of the messaging in this movie. When I got to interview the director with Jason from Sinister Cinema, who, thank you for letting me do that, Jason, he told us exactly what it's about. So if you've seen this movie and you're still curious, watch that interview on Sinister Cinema Reviews. He'll tell you, we had a really great interview with him. But yeah, I love this film. There was so many brutal moments in the film. One in particular has got to be the king of the kills for the entire year. And it is one of those scenes that does things that I was not expecting. Demian Rugna does not shy away from that shit, let me tell you, in any of his movies. And man, he really goes there, and I fucking love him for it. Like, I love it because it is horrifying. But this movie has a deeper message. It is very different from Terrified. I'm probably leaning a little bit more towards Terrified as my personal favorite of the 2. But this is so different and unique. You know, it's one of those movies that you kind of can watch a couple of times and get a couple of different things from. Highly recommend. It is in a higher class of acting and shot and scares and practical effects and some of the appalling, brutal, crazy stuff that happens in this film that even if you don't love the film, you're never going to forget it. I think he's a master of horror. I hope the whole world gets to see more of his films because I can't wait to see the next. But yeah, guys, that's it. The top 10 is never going to be anybody else's particular taste. It's always going to be yours because it's tit for tat, little tiny things that may have leaned in your favor. And, you know, just because I didn't have one of your favorite films on this top 10 list doesn't mean it's not on my top 10 to 20, which I did on the podcast. Link below. Some of these films hit differently because of different situations, different movies we've seen, different things that we resonate with. But let's hope that next year is at least this good, if not better. I hope you found at least one movie on this list that you might have not seen. And if you're looking for more, like I said, follow that link below. But other than that, thank you guys so much. We got so much planned for you this year. So definitely hit the like and subscribe button and let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. But thanks for coming by, and as always, long live the board.